Alright, Nambo has some Yamlin, some Nalakom Jadi, you get Dashu Lutin, the Niakawaris, the Santa Niakawaris said. Dene Nina, Lutin Pe, Masasa Chimbo, De Tenlia, Jugi, Shanley, Pando Truvia, Pando Shu Tuya, Rangi, Dundag, and the Jig, and Jawachima, Hada Muko, Topachi, Yamlin, and Yamlin Tuya. And the Tarvata Tamjikim go on to be a lam yamnajan, a cheat to be a Kabachin is up and Lutin, the Duan Chimbori, Sergeant, Duan Chimbos. Just under Din Delia, Duan Chimbos, and the Din Delia, that the Deniki Duan Chimbo, but the Sosuki Page, Yamnaj Majabaina, and then Jiggy, Aji Chiagi, Yin Jig de Lela, Arsenic King and Parshe. GL Parshi Mongu, your king, Kim Mongu Shusha, but Chile Lava in the Dadenia, a chick, Yudi Capria, Tana Yubi Capri, Yamlin chickens and pay some down. On two chin some down warriors. Then Yamlin Jay, the Carasana, Anzuki, Lake in Jay, Yamlin Jay, a lake in the sun. Then Lay said on Zuki. Give me Java Chapala, Migati Tibutuma, Yungur, which is not the Miguel Sazag in the Chime, some gave Java Chapalatine and the Tibu Digi Yungur, which is not gave out the count to Tukins and big Luciane, Manzania Menchia, the Luciane, at Casan, and the Tineshirua.
Good morning. So, yesterday, in the verses we looked at, we came to recognize how this precious human rebirth that we attained with quite some difficulty because of all the variety of causes that are required to achieve a rebirth as remarkable as we've achieved. And whilst it was difficult to attain, now that we have it, this is a life with tremendous potential. This is a life that, unlike the vast majority of beings, we can live in a truly meaningful way. A meaningful way, living a meaningful life, refers to that we have the capacity to accumulate the causes that are required for further good rebirths. But more than that, we can also accumulate the causes that bring an end to our suffering in samsara in its entirety. And whilst doing so, we can be of great benefit to others too. These are all part of the incredible capacity that a being with this intelligence can achieve. But whilst this is the case, that we've achieved something that is rare and precious and can be used in a meaningful manner, this life is very delicate and is likened to a water bubble in that it can be, in dependence on minor causes, it can be brought to an abrupt end. Moreover, even if one lives out one's full lifespan, when we compare across the multitude of lives that a being has already lived, this is brief, like a water bubble. So therefore, recognizing this, we can need to commit to both striving to accumulate virtue, wholesome karma, and abandoning non-wholesome karma. In other words, developing our habituation to wholesome, virtuous ways of thinking and breaking our habituation to unwholesome ways of thinking.
Nyamlen Chis, Dangan, Sanjio want to be Chirdu, Dangan, Samnalaya, Nyamlen Chis, Sosugo Gomja, the Karelamna, Nadambo, Coralia, and Kanzugi, Masonda, Koriki, Dunga Tadalia, Tawudus, Chisan Dunga, the Matan Tabinos and Besam Daje. They are Shajibu Mayimba, Simja, Tamja Kovi Dunga, Tawudu, Chisan Simja, Tamja Deva, Gudu, Chisarana, Deva Deva Chibare, Chisan Simja, Tamja Deva, the temper shows and begin. These some of the Yana, the Comia, the share. The name Iba de la, Simja, Tamja Dunga, and Trawa shows and big some of the Yana, the Com. And the dinner, Simja, Tamja Dunga, and Trawa, Simja, the Tempa, and A. Jigi in, Chisan, Simja, Pemba, Jugi, Chisadangi, Simja, Tamjalia, and Jigi. Deo to Yaga, Tabla, Lamdun, the party, and Yamlin, Jesu, Konzuyan, Digi, Ya Tarpa, Tamjikimbo, Malakugins, and Bigida, some Latinish Daje. The nigger down the Dichelia, and the nigger may call ya Lamdun, Simjala, Lamdun, J2, Nuba, 2 minutes sometime, that is also let me do 매바자다 안에 되니기 람든 탈침바 제투게 셈징게 된 게침보 제투게 수레스나 상계제샤스 제자당의 상계고마 토고도 셈젤라 판도 집이 제게 된다라 상계고마 마tum나 탐민도 선배 삼다제 되네 셈자 탐지게 된 상계고마 토버쇼 셈베게담 삼마게야디 안도 자주 셈세치 송거래 어두래 되니게 삼마디 육군에 라제 나니 셈자 탐지 상계고마 토비 치도 다는 가르쳐서니 류롱제 계속다 제바 탐지 샹리아 건철의 최고 부여다 샹리아 진바다에 냠렌지 지긴 셈베 냠렌지야 데 군원 지긴 셈베 삼다야다 소소 강토도 제야 되네 류가 예수님 예죄된 비 수림송야 되네 안에 전제 좀야다 세보kom야 되네 다음에 바토비 아까 소리 신의 주 되네 다음에 바토비 셰랍콤 또 되네 델레데 실라소로 콤발레 콤고고리스 어디 냠렌 제바디 당한저게 레 카르벨레 산지요고반 토비 치도 뉴사이게 삼노디 디투스 냠렌 제오레 되네 냠렌 제바이나 제고 산지요고반 토토고리에서지 당한저 냠렌 제고야 돼 디리에서 가상아저 나디슈거와
Moreover, yesterday we briefly looked at the various causes, wholesome causes that need to be accumulated to achieve the three varying results of Buddhism. A further good rebirth, liberation from samsara, or Buddhahood itself. So to review then the causes that are required to achieve the exalted state of omniscience, of Buddhahood, one reflects first on the sufferings of samsara, giving rise to a determination to gain freedom from the suffering realms of samsara, recognizing that there is nothing worthy of striving for within the realms of samsara, because suffering just will continue to be experienced. So one gives rise to the determination, I want to bring my suffering experiences to an end, I want to gain freedom, gain liberation from samsara. Then, based on that, or in dependence on that prior meditation, one then lifts one's view and recognizes that all other beings are in the same position as I am, bound in the suffering realms of samsara due to the afflictions on our own continuum, which all come from the same root cause. Recognizing that we are all in the same position of suffering, but yearning for freedom, we generate the thought that may all beings, myself and all others, gain freedom from suffering. May myself and all others abide in lasting happiness, never punctuated by even a moment of pain or misery. And then we develop these minds of compassion and love to the point where we take responsibility for the welfare, for the happiness of others. And we take it as our own personal responsibility that each being attains a state of lasting freedom. So this is the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility, or the wholehearted resolve, where we take this as our personal responsibility. Having done so, we recognize that right now, because we are still bound in samsara, how can we possibly guide others skillfully? We have to become the most skilled of guides, a Buddha, because it's only a Buddha who has perfected their own mind that can be of best use to others. So we make the determination, I will become a Buddha for the sake of others. And this then is a generation of bodhicitta, the determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And then the final section of the meditation is that in order to become a Buddha, I have to train my mind. And one thereby engages in the meditations on generosity, where we train our mind to give of ourselves, to be of service to others in all ways that we have the capacity to. Accompanying that, we train in ethics, the determination not to harm others, not to harm them through our physical behavior, our way of speaking, or our way of thinking. We train further in patience and joyous perseverance, then the additional courses of single-pointed concentration and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And as these 6 trainings from generosity up to wisdom are all conjoined with bodhicitta, they become the causes for the attainment of Buddhahood.
안도 시행냠lenche 오래서 나가서 되시요. 다 되네게 담변에 코와랑 예중 나 다른 예중께 엔텔에 털비게 탈로 톱디게 삼로다 전주 안 상주 고바 토비 치도 네 톱되게 삼보 군노 매바다 아니 제네기 다음에 봐 토비기 시라플라서 마케바체 다 띵이진 지부로 시내로 띵이진 검제 삼든 제주니베 띵이진 검 소소라라게 다당아 띵이진 시내 토요래 띵이진 토요세 베다는 나야 롬바 나야 게야다 나 직배 연된 친구가 개발인 섬제 소소랑 아예제 다디 띵이기 띵이진 검반 타바 톱그레 삼베게 다 삼다제 삼든 지부 검바이나 안디기 타바토 투구마 타바고바 투구마 탐지 김벽고바 투구마래 해서지 네 숨고래 그래서 가상한테디 타마들이 이마 삼된 삼달에 두스고마 투구마래 해서지 딩이지 곰바이나 데니기 딩이지 곰바이나 지켜와 치마 저기 지네 레요고바 토발라 용고래 맞아 네 이나 타바다 탐지 김벽고바 투구마 가서 타바 탐지 김벽고바 토발라 닝이 중에 삼바 삼바 코월에 탈되게 삼바 제단 탈바 탐지김에 고모도 군모지 디톤에다 디지지도 공부 다음에 봐 신이 줍 신이 디데네 다음에 봐 동반일에 미비 신이 줍제 지시라 손으로 줍 디공바는 탈바다 탐지김에 고바 토고마도 삼된 지부 공부 삼기 탈바도 두고 말해 사실
Where we concluded in the text yesterday was a warning from Lama Tsongkhapa about the danger of conceit, where one thinks, I know better. I don't need to engage in the accumulation of all these causes to gain liberation from cyclic existence. I've seen the dangers of remaining bound in samsara. I want to gain freedom, and I will do that solely through cultivating calm abiding or single-pointed concentration. There's no need for me to cultivate the rest of the causes. I know better. So from under the influence of such a conceit, such arrogance, one then strives to develop single-pointed concentration, thinking mistakenly that the attainment of single-pointed concentration leads to liberation or even enlightenment. Now, this is deeply mistaken. When should one attain solely single-pointed concentration, the mind will be far more subdued, more peaceful than it is now. But these karmic causes can only lead to rebirth in future lives as a god. But one will still be bound within samsara. One will be still far from attaining liberation and not even have begun for the attainment of enlightenment. So this is a deep error, a great error arising from conceit. Single-pointed concentration is an incredibly powerful mind. When it has been generated on the basis of the other trainings of ethics, generosity, choice, perseverance, and patience, and then having been generated is conjoined with wisdom, then one has all the causes required to gain liberation from samsara. And when all those causes are also conjoined with bodhicitta, then one has all that is required, all the causes required to attain enlightenment. So single-pointed concentration or calm abiding is of great use. But due to conceit, one can think that attaining it alone will lead to liberation or enlightenment, whereas that is not at all the case. Now turning back to the text, to the 13th verse. Otherwise, remorse will follow all that boastful behavior. This would be like a trader returning to their home from an island of gold, carrying and wearing trinkets that were mistaken for jewels. This needs to be known.
다디 돈다듯이 오기다 셀링 침비 총발라로네 랑기 유도 조신 리바 죄세디 비로 차고디.
So this verse is presenting an illustration that needs to be understood well. And to read it again, otherwise remorse will follow all that boastful behavior, and then comes the illustration. That would be like a trader returning to their home from an island of gold, carrying and wearing trinkets that were mistaken for jewels.
지산다 뒤니마 디네리도암 근데 너버 트니 직니베 너버 트니 친위기 쿠르토베신 도르르시 케로아시그로다 안 셀링 친비어 총발라 로니 세디 고고베테 다디던다 가르송로스니 베로시네 베나가 저기 다 너버뇨 총자 총바시 지게 셀다 데니 유서지 몽고실파 친제 안지게 예 셀랑아치 다 노 친제 파치네 데네 셀디 야보 하모가치 도장자 셀멤버 도장자지 파수시네 내게 직케제 안소소 도르 지지워체다 제수케요 바이나서 너부 추네 친구요 쿠르 톡바세데 너부디파 문에 마인비레 추셰 친구 도로시 몽부케제 안 도르 몽부지 케지요 바이나 내게 안에 셀링 친비 총발라로네서고 조사디 셀녀와체 셀여서디 친발에 셀여서디 레바레 이나도고 셀이 이 하모가체 추셰或者对的下上或者셀샤 삼제디 추이션 주케제나 그런 안치기 나는야 저 로용와리 예식으로다 라 로네세디 직바와니디 차로다 베로시 직바와니디 차기도와 바와이 당 직니바도 순번니디 베디 차기도와 돼.
So in the second and third line, the illustration is presented. So the meaning is an analogy of a prospector traveling to a distant land, where a land that is known for having plentiful gold, and this prospector just collects a large number of pebbles rather than nuggets of gold. Then they return back home thinking that they have great wealth, showing off this great wealth that they think they've achieved, but really they're just wearing pebbles on their body, not actual gold nuggets.
지사다 데네기 키연도 안출레네 안지게 출레 산에데네 다 그런 망타세 키열데나 출레 사이에 가셔서네 데네 디젤이야 미션다다 데네 하고한테 디셀 말에 도레샤세 샷삼도 거네 는 가소레 로팜 쉬용구로 와다 로팜 명하다 안직 뭐서로 자야다 데네 용구로 와시래 지사 대지 직당보디 제비 유기 농바디다 그래서 유기 농바서 유기 세디 벤 로팜 세다 농바세도 뭐 자와로시 제사 데네기 뭐 차야지다 로팜 빼서 셀랭에서 친지 데네기 뭔고 여바딩이 마케어지 빼사셔 당에 노르 휴중셔서 로팜 명하다 안지기 어된 지금 뭐 저거로 차야다 데네 용고래 해시 내 도시는 베로시디리도
One imagines then them returning home, boasting about their newfound wealth, but then taking these pebbles to traders who actually know their business well, and they can easily recognize that these aren't nuggets of gold, but are just pebbles. And from such boastful behavior, the prospector will feel despondent at having wasted their time.
다지게 노블레야 나싱아 주게 다 세르기 요새게 사진 나신디 가르스네 아 주게 단주 밀류 좀 버지 토바디 있어야 류딘디 다 세르요서 사지디다 지바래 나조 세르요서 사지 총보되지 세르요서 사지를 레바 나싱 아조 다도 단주 밀류 톱되어레스 제자당 아 주게 단주 밀류 톱되베 된델야 노블레바 나신지 당 아주 레디 닝보디 레디 가르스네 데레게 주 대디유야 규디야 탈바 탐지kimbe 고모토게 냠는 제들이스 지사디 냠는 제 고고레스 지사디 냠는 제고 때때 냠는 제디 응원에디 마체바체 안능아 주게 지 띵이선 삼달의 신의 지구 곰제 아니지게 고와라 탈도의 예중의 삼바다 아니지게 다음에 봐도 베시라 델미비기 신의 실라 소바 먹음바 순 수rim기 아치 냠는 마체바 있나 띵에진 지구 곰제 다디 곰나 타바 토그레 디 타베 규리에스메 개와 휴치리에스메 삼는 따베네 디 가서레 노르보다 추이시에 도드나진 차들다 도나진 노 노봉원의 차요 말 타바 탐지기며 고바도비 균원의 차요 말와 제사 디 그런 추이제네 타바 탐지기 보고반도 유디에 다배하고 다대가 냠는 시우치기에서 배삼다 되면은 두세배는 나 쿠르톡바세 되네 검전에 윤지 두세 망고 있던 걸로 와다 냠는 두시고 할때 이내 타마라 가르쳐 와서는 아니 타마하고 요도 안디 타바 탐지기 보고반도 유마인 바데 하고 요도 안 소소야 아니 유기 농바디다 꾸엔세데 유기 농바세데 소소라야 다 노르셔 심비 로팜게다 아니 모사야게데 용고레스 제자 다 타마데레 디 랑기 유도 조신 리퍼츠에세데 제자 디 세르링아 제제 세르하모가죠 도케 조셔나 직버로시 다데네 아주 된지 밀리르 뭐 톱데네게 냠는지 야고 유어바데야 지 냠네 야고데 제마신 바지 하모가죠 노르제제 아니 삼단 직부진 검대바 이나다 네 검발아 자그레 디네 검비 멤비게다 삼단 먹음바나 체델야 소소게다 남연게 내가 나주기 지딘베 내가 파바 직부제제 두신의 두시게바 이나 당아주게 타바 탐지기 먹고 와토비 냠는 제마토바데 로팜지다 아니 배지 뭐사야 지네시레사 너나지 디나 숨거다
Taking this analogy then and applying it, comparing it to our own situation. So this body, this life that we have all achieved, this is our island of gold. This precious human rebirth is like an island of gold. And the prospector setting out on their quest is likened to us training our mind, engaging in practice so as to bring an end to the sufferings of samsara. But instead of the practitioner training in the way that they are guided, and developing the foundation of ethical restraint, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance, they follow their own desires, their own arrogance, and go straight to trying to accomplish single-pointed concentration. And in this way, despite all their endeavors, they end up with a pouch full of pebbles rather than a pouch full of nuggets of gold. And this prospector then ends up no nearer to being wealthy as a meditator who just achieves a single point of concentration. That meditator is no nearer attaining liberation. So in brief, the meaning of this analogy is do not waste this opportunity. In the same way that a trader or a prospector has an opportunity to go to an island full of gold, we have that opportunity with this precious human rebirth. Don't waste it by following one's own desires, ignoring the good advice of one's spiritual teacher, and following and striving just to achieve the peaceful state of calm abiding. Don't make that mistake. So this is the warning at the very heart of this analogy.
Danda ngāzu ñamlin chē de la jērim chē ngāzu labja rōchi karandan gōra sene tā kiāngāzu ane tā tēn tā tē chīki tēn rinpoche līngli lēpa nāshīn ane tēn chū mīlu rinpoche top tēyo yorēs chē sāng khāsāng shūpa nāshīn tēn chū līngli chē nye kāwā sē de kiāngāzu nye tēyo yorē rā yorēs chē sā tā nye nā tēn chū mīlu rinpoche tuyān chīmbu rē sē de tuyān chīmbu shī tuyān kiāngāzu yu de yorē chē sāng tuyān chīmbu rē kiāngāzu tā tēn tēli yā kiāngāzu ki 지게위 개와치마 하다미 고방 토비치도 냠는 가르체베네 아니 디규디 사투그리스 안디 마세 개와치마 가서 마오보나 타르바토비에게 된도 냠는지는 규 고미 잡에네 경험도 띵대로 곰 두고래 곰지에게 냠는지하고 뉴바다 튕에 차상 상대 말했어 디나시 셈자 탐지기도는 산요 고방 토비치도 아니 잠니제 안장주 셈 근데 데니게 파춘 중에 냠는 제바이나 냠는 제 투에게 된 차상 상대와 지레 제가 데니게 자침보 탈바 탐지기 보고 뭐 줍투에게 된 개발진 인자다 데니게 레디어 데니자디 결혼 중에 디른 고합디 안지게 노트마쇼와체 그래서 야보지 냠는 제가도 뺏기심을 해서 거다 데니게 냠는 마제바이나 안지 도시에 냠는 마제버지 시도바이네 되네 개와도 좀 투여 말 마도 바인자 마슬 용시부라 거래스 노트다 용을 차거든요 지 예, 아주 되게 냠는지가 약고 지사제 레바데 냠는 마제바제 두 스토베는 경다 땅을 로팜다 되네 뭐 사고 얘기도 시차고래 되네자 저한테디 냠는 약고 지고래 해서지 나선 거래.
This is precisely what Lama Tsongkhapa is trying to convey to us here, that this golden isle of a precious human rebirth, something that is so rare and difficult to obtain, you have done so. You have done so, which means you have the capacity now to achieve all the good causes required to achieve a further good rebirth. Not only that, you have the capacity to accumulate the causes that will lead to liberation. And in fact, you have the very capacity required to accumulate the causes, the actual causes that will lead to Buddhahood. None of this is beyond you. You have this incredible opportunity. Please do not waste it. This life you've achieved, this golden isle, it will come to an end. And when it is ending, do not look back. Do not be in the position where you look back on your life with regret, recognizing that this incredible opportunity wasn't fully utilized, that all that could have been achieved in this life was not. So now, whilst there is still time, make the most of it.
치워 삼나 치머를 조랍지 레제 삼나 밤에 내라도 내래 독사.
Then the 14th verse. If you recognize that this life is difficult to obtain, you will be able to overcome laziness. If you see its great potential, you will not regret transcending what is meaningless. If you reflect on death, you will prepare for your imminent future. If you contemplate karma, non-conscientiousness will not last, but will be counteracted.
나디네게 아주게 다들이야 녀가 리나 인을 뒤에다 메시데 나카상 아주게 디레 가상 슈바나시 다시 예가와 된체와 안에지게 인치와 미다바 안에지게 렌제 메밀로아세 가상 디슈라 디스고 디디던다 송 디레다 제가 녀가 리나 시다 아주 류디 제 녀가와 임바디 파 심주시 제바 제제 삼다도 녀가와 레샤 선비가 삼모디 파 하고요나 네 기너 되다 메스데 아주 레로체네 아니 게셔 마사바 되게 탑요 말에 게셔 사기리 싸고 사기리에서 다 진이게 네 야고치 하고 봐나 만주게 지게 레로체네 게위 자와 지리메 바 레로 기너세데 레로 용 말에 레로체 되탑요 말에 세데 다티 간실레 디 개와 주에게 베스 용구리에서 그러다 지 투구리에서 그러 당아주 조딩아 주게다 아주 류딘디 짜침부 가서 녀가와 임바된 아주게 삼로 코투고 말 하야고 차고 두고 말 내게 제가 심주시 제바제랑게 난주 류딘의 녀가와 임바된 녀가와 슈슈에도 선배 삼다에도 난 마오바나디라기 탑름 규딜이 베제 마제바제 혈려체 네 가서 우리 레로시 되게 되투고 말에 되게 뒤즈요 말에서 오다 대답 메세데.
So this verse then summarizes the benefits of reflecting on the topics that we covered yesterday, the freedoms and endowments that we have all achieved, the impermanence though of this precious human rebirth, and cause and effect. So these benefits of engaging in these meditations, coming to recognize the validity of what is presented here, these benefits are summarized in this verse. And it comes down to overcoming laziness. And within the different types of laziness, there is the laziness of being following meaningless activities, putting our time and our energy into achieving things which really have no value. Here, in these meditations that are being summarized here, we are being encouraged to lift up our view, to take the blinkers off our eyes, and recognize just what we have obtained. Recognize that what we have obtained is rare and difficult to achieve. Do not take it for granted anymore. no longer see it as ordinary. This is the confused ignorance with which we live our life. These are the blinkers that we wear, thinking what we have achieved is ordinary, is common, when in fact it is rare and difficult to attain.
지산 되네게 흘려져 되게 뒤주 요마레스 지산 되네 자당 주고 리딘데 다데냐바 베 직사 첨보다 니가와 임바데 포 삼노당 제바 제제 삼노당제 니가와 임바 하고 와제 되네기 몽바네 되네기 리딘디 토베게 된다려야 니 개와 싸고야디 자네 싸고르마도 뒤주 흘려제제 아니 지 레로제 되게 뒤주 요마레 인지 민지디 냠는 개와 치마게 나하다 미고방 토예기 덴다데 덴나신디 토야들이야 규디 사이드 베주신의 사고를 해야지 시당 데 안저 녀가 된자 하모한디게리야 녀가와 임바的 삼다 하고 와제 데네 안저 몽반에 데네기 덴디 토야기 된다라 규사고를 마도 데네기 흘려진 남면지 되어 뒤수 요마다스 데네 제고리다스 송고르와다.
We're being exhorted here to shake ourselves up from our stupor, to recognize just what we've achieved, to recognize its great value, and to no longer take it for granted. Time is impermanent, it changes momentarily. This conception that we have an expanse of time before us and good rebirth after good rebirth before us, this is an illusion. We do not have time. This life will end and it can end at any moment. Therefore, whatever it is that remains, use it well. Use your intelligence. Shake yourself awake from the stupor. Use your intelligence. Accumulate virtue in whatever time is left.
산델리아 안주게 된주 리드니 니가와 임바 제바제 하고 환지다 당안주 제바 하모가 니용으로 와다 지사다 된주 리드니 니가와 임바 제바제 야고 치명해바 니힌디기기 안에 가소레 치만음수야 된주 리드니 토베체도 람리아 냠는제레 베주치기를 마도 되네기 아니 지금 레로치는 뒤수티 철라당 말에 사지 되네식스 고야시도와 되네 당아 주게 단주 리든데 예가와 임바다 하모한데 게라 안 경화즈데 심주제 제바제 예가와래다 예가와 임바 좀제 삼다 하고 와지 되네 하고네 안마 몽바다 되네 토예의 규델이야 베스제제 베스제는 게 냠는 제거를 마도 이제 그 레로체제 레로체 니가소레 되네게 되게 뒤주 요마다 아니 지상 안주 시에 되게 되네 뒤주 타냐냐 주게지게지 타냐냐 주고래 제상 다든도 제고고래 세지 꾸마셔야 돼. 네 돈아니 구도 니용사로 하더라.
Here we're being encouraged to step out of the ordinary way of seeing things. Most people who have a precious human rebirth do not recognize that. And most who come to hear this presentation, they may intellectually have some understanding, but it doesn't transform them, which means their ignorance remains dominant, their blinkers remain intact. So here we're being encouraged to think for ourselves, to investigate, to analyze, to really come to recognize just what it is that we've achieved, this great value that comes with this human rebirth that makes it so precious, this rebirth which is rare and difficult to achieve. And that too is what makes it so precious. So through doing analysis and investigation, not merely hearing and then moving on, one can alter how we value this life and therefore alter how we utilize what remains of this life, no longer being lost in meaningless activities, but keeping our mind on virtue no matter what we are doing. So this is the outcome that we are being encouraged to strive towards, and to no longer be one of so many who either do not recognize the precious human rebirth has been achieved, or those who have recognized it, but it yet is to make an impact on their mind. Don't be left amongst them. Investigate, lift your view, and strive to make the most of this life.
하나 되네 나되네 이바들 된체 하나 되면 다와 방세다 당아 주 류딘들에 배 되나 전부 주투에 임바 자 전부 된다 전부 슈 주투에 바 탈바다 탐제 김보 고바 토에 유냠는 차상 제투에 바다 되네 아주 제와치마 하다 미고본 규차상 주투에 바 두스네 되나 전부 슈 지임바다 인디 멤베게 당아서 제딜이나 소수게 디규투야레 소소가 강아 세투에 세게 탑람 배제 차상 제투에게 누부에 현디다 아주 류딘들이 제산 돈다심보 시고치 임바체 자 된제 통화세대 되니기다 냠는지 제바치 돈다 침부 주투에 바데 통바이나 하고간 뒤에 되니게 또네 네바니 현디기나 되니 디텐델이야 지 냠는지야디 네지게 냠는지제 제마도 된다 매바 두시네 냠는 마제바제 되면 당와네 배지가 두수로지 빼니 냠 마제바제 두션 오다디 니디 디주트 촐라탄세 빼사사 선비기다 디니기니 네 촐라 조샤 선비 로팜게다 디네 용고래 제사 디니기 네바 야고니 현디나 된델에 준비게 냠는 지기리 사제 송고로바다 고 냠는 제고래 지기리 사제 제고래 사제 제 지기리 안비 제고래서 구마제 니가 용고로와
The second line, if you see its great potential, you will not regret transcending what is meaningless. So the great potential is that we, unlike so many beings, we have the potential to achieve causes that will lead to further good rebirths, and in fact achieve causes that lead to liberation and enlightenment. This is the great potential of a precious human rebirth. And when one sees this, recognizes this, one will not want to let this life go to waste. One will be determined to ensure that we keep our mind on virtue, no matter what we are engaged in, not wanting to waste this opportunity, not wanting to be like the trader returning from the Golden Isle, but rather to utilize what remains of this life well.
아다 되니게 삼론단 제바지는 된다 침을 쭉쭉이 된지이바 하모가 능한지 두신 하모가 디길 경험도 두신 된다 침보레 베 마스 된다 쭉쭉 리틴디 베 마스 자 침보 된다 침보 쭉쭉이 시 된 침보레다 두수수 삼다 된다 침보 하고바 제네 하고네 되니 된다 된 침보들이야 아니 배슈에 따제 소소한 배슈에 따 아니 지기 개변냠는 되게 제고래 제사딘이 마제바지 뒤set 파 조바이나 베 로함다 소소 경다 로함식으로 해야 돼. 제사디 제고가 되게 침보레 해야 돼. 당한줄이야. 두신나 납전난 거로와.
For those vast majority of people who have not yet come to recognize the great potential of this life, how can they make the most of it? How can they achieve its potential? But we now have come to recognize this life's potential. This ignorance, this confused ignorance that has dominated so, is challenged. So utilize this opportunity to change what we value and to apply ourselves so as to ensure we do not waste what remains of this life.
아나 치워섬네 치워 드럽제세도 당아 저기 치워섬제 그지칭에메데 제자님이 시루구를 SMB게 치워디바 지미 치워 메다바도 신의 섬다데 야고 하고 봐이나 되니게 하고 건디기 냠는데야 늦게와 치마 줘야리야 치마 줘야리야 안데 치마 디기 두에기 탑람 가려서 디 탑람지 냠는지 제지셔야 돼 제지시고 지고로 와서 니나제 당아 저이네 다 치워서야 돼 지장 차상 용해야 돼 지장 게디칭 해봐요. 말 치에 다 쳐봐. 지산 치워도 연구래. 디네상 치에네 가오 두고래스네. 안게와 치마치 두고래. 치마 줘서들 하다. 그 원토다. 지가 손 줘서 이些. 제가 당한 저 가서 줘나 동안 연구가 강할 제가 디에서 덴돌 연구래. 제가 덴돌 줘야기 제리치고래서 줘랍지에서 줘야기다. 가르가르 구구거선 제리치고래서 제리치야데 가라서는 개와 치마 아니 류딘 야보요하데 디텐리야 디규주야게 규 아니 규디야 가서 냠내 제고를 해서 제자다 가상한 규시야디 능아이 순위치도 추준서야다 진배 냠내 쇠바 준주 삼대 가서 준주 냠내 제야 어두세 디스이스고다 되네게다 개와 치마 줘야기 디규주에 델리야 규 제지 제고를 해서 그러다 드랍지에스.
The first two lines are about recognizing this precious human rebirth we've achieved and its great potential. And the third line then reminds us but it is impermanent. This life is impermanent. So the third line, if you reflect on death, you'll prepare for your imminent future. So we all intellectually recognize that death will come, but we need to also recognize that it can come at any time due to any number of reasons. And when we breathe out for the last time in this body, we will then breathe in our next breath will be in a new body. And where that body will be, where that new life will be, is dependent entirely on the causes that we create. So when this life ends, a new rebirth will follow. And that new rebirth can be only in one of two directions, either remaining in the higher realms or falling into the lower realms. And which of those two directions we travel in is entirely dependent on the causes that we ourselves create. So when one recognizes this, it should give one a sense of agency, a strength from the recognition that I can take care of my future rebirths by ensuring I prepare well. And how to prepare well for our future journey, our imminent future? It's through creating those right causes, those causes mentioned yesterday: ethical restraint, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and prayer. So from these lines that we've looked at already, it leads us to a strong encouragement to prepare well for our future lives. Because across lifespans, this life is very brief, but what lies before us are many lifetimes to come. So at the very least, we need to accumulate causes that will lead to excellent rebirths. But we have capacity for so much more than just that. We have the capacity to, in addition to creating causes for future rebirths, by gathering more knowledge and thinking more deeply, we can alter our motivation so that those same causes become causes for freedom from samsara in its entirety, to gain freedom from uncontrolled rebirth. So thinking like this then, we can strengthen our determination to bring an end to the possibility of ever falling into the lower realms, and even bring an end to our uncontrolled rebirth within the suffering realms of samsara. In other words, we can create causes to lead to liberation from samsara in its entirety. And moreover, by thinking of others, recognizing they are in the same position as ourselves, we can strive for Buddhahood itself. All of that is possible for us. All of that is possible to do in whatever it is that remains of this life.
现在去金忙是路不列的，那俺是税务的差不多。
Can I just check? Can you hear me at the back much? Not so much. Not so much.
嘿，那我们怎么这个呢
？So Geshe says maybe we just sit quietly for a moment. Those who can hear, what Geshe also said was that right now there are countless beings outside who have no idea what's happening, but they are dying. This rain will be killing many small insects outside. And what can they do? They have very limited capacity. And this is the state of so many beings in samsara, having no control over the ending of their lives.
然是先就过的二里头啊，就嘛个告诉厕所出来的，厕所出来就当个出来忙不住了吧？人家做对个不啦？你在上就写个什么嘛，就当个做就当个做个住了吧？那明天开始个面大起在哒的，没忙我说些个多，就在今天的类型的，所写什么嘛，就当个住的，什么这个萝卜的健康特性，真是忙不得从来多当。
Likewise, when we think of going out with friends and having a lovely evening, so especially when you're younger, maybe we'd go to concerts, go to parties and this kind of thing. But if you think of what happened to many young people in Russia a couple of Fridays ago, they went out to have some entertainment and they end up being killed, dying a horrible death. So we think we have time. We live as if we have time. We live as if we have time to lose ourselves once in abandon. But there are so many causes that can bring about our death. And this is the very real situation for beings in samsara.
第那个，但这个第那个外面经济车的这个地区外面没办法，俺说大点的怕说个这里去下边呢，本来叫我起码原来刚说另外年纪对不出这说，前边年龄节，那时候把它专注给都是年龄节下要把那说个年龄的月对不对？给的这经验特性细说呢，个那刚刚是个太阳嘛，个叫我起码人家电要不起来没接进来的呢。大家讲说，那全部人地来但是也还是给那穷穷的阶层，这个是把他在讲过的这个也还是给用了啊，就像逐步谈那些。的那啥的，这个这里接下来呢，刚刚是这样嘛，但是上的那啥这个什么的，我的应该是这个体育国际线呢，被这个什么两个的现在的第三档个要嘛的，这个什么档的嘛档的现在去把它打完呢。第二在当说个在这里哦，说个给出来，这里去把给出来，你们接下来呢？第二你搞出来呢，现在嘛现在开发干没了吧？这个是西边呢，刚刚是太阳嘛第一季，快电去没留意的么是透过的，电的第一用过了话，加上康不今年不要接，康不啥不进来呀，接不接不要看他基本上差不多嘛都对了吧？但这里没办法，这里马这边呢，当然这个西双呢就是罗盘国家来采购啊，加上第二在当然就这都采购啊，加上这里原来刚刚开样嘛了，加上第二在当然这个短大了，这个第二年就这里这的三路的大点的这个用一个短大了，西国了的，第二在的是拉姆萨的这个的。就是有点可不能那么啥的，年龄结婚了，过好的心结，年龄结婚了也是我的。
A key point to make in this meditation is that whilst doing the meditation, it's especially when one's fairly new to the practice, some anxiousness or anxiety may well arise, but ensure that that is not how the meditation concludes, because the purpose of meditating with reasons with reasoning is to utilize our intelligence. It's not an intelligent outcome if one is anxious. Rather, when we utilize our intelligence, we recognize that all we can do is the best that we can do. Nothing more, we can't expect anything more than that. We can only do the best we can with the knowledge that we have, the intelligence that we have, and the amount of time left that we have. All we can expect from ourselves is to do the best we can. And in the meditation, when we imagine our death, imagine ourselves lying on our deathbed looking back, the only question to be answered is between this point right now and that point, did I utilize my time well? Did I take care of my mind in all my activities? Did I do this to the best of my capacity? And where the answer is yes, we can die with confidence, can let go from this life with a relaxed mind, knowing that I've used that period of time as best as I could. And now I'm leaving this old decrepit body, just like a house that is falling down, and I'm going to move into a new home, a new temporary residence. And we can let go and move on to a new body. So that's how our mind should be. Use it with intelligence. We do come to the conclusion that I'll do the very best I can, so that when death does come, I can leave this body, leave this life in a relaxed manner. But furthermore, to state that, especially for those of us who are not so young, we can look back at the changes in our body and mind, and we can recognize that right now, we are probably in the best state that we are likely to be for the rest of this life. As one ages, the decline is quite clear. So when you recognize this too, use it as motivation. Let me utilize whatever it is that remains well. Even if what remains is not an abundance of time or an abundance of excellent health, whatever it may be, all I can ask for myself is to use that as well as I can. And then, when the end of this life comes, we can look back without regret, and we can look forward without fear.
Dine tamadile ne leje samna ba me ne le to sene jezada jugi da khasa leje miluare se chibare da leje samna se leje gi pa ji samda ji ngewe lege jewo ane je digi yong yo ba da ne ji migi we lege jewo an dunga yo ba di pa samda dine samda jang jeba je samda 야고치 설야 소수게 삼야 하고요도 아니 바민엘에도 하세요. 되네 하고요도 되네 개위 잡아 루그를 마도 개위 잡아 마도 가지 바미베네 다 지금 안 저기 미게 와다 되네게 지기 요야게 개위 레갈라 아니 지금 말에 사지 지금 말에 사신 거로 레데 삼나 바민엘에도
In the fourth line, if you contemplate karma, non-conscientiousness will not last but be counteracted. So if you contemplate karma, as we've spoken about briefly, cause and effect, we recognize that everything one experiences is a result that comes about in dependence on causes. If those causes were wholesome or virtuous, it will be a desired result of happiness. If those causes were non-virtuous, suffering will result, and that is definite. So if you contemplate this well, if you contemplate karma, then you'll come to a conclusion that all causes that are accumulated matter. So therefore, I must ensure I turn away even from small non-virtuous causes, or what did we have in the 12th verse? Turn away from even small negative causes and ensure I accumulate even small positive causes. That way of thinking stops or counteracts non-conscientiousness. Non-conscientiousness is an attitude of, this doesn't matter, this isn't important, when actually, in reality, it is.
Ba me be ni se de nga zu nyomo ji 다 녀몬지에게 내시로다 녀몬지가 유 자와 대설야는 자와 지금 말해서지 다 되니게 레리게 남자 야구 삼당 제바체 소소하고 되니게 야구 밀로와 렌제 밀로에 선배 야구 하고도 아니 되니게 디파사이게 레갈야 지금 말해서다 하고는 로다 제사 된내래 도서 당아도 하모고는 다디 그 가르송으로서는 제사 레제세 밀로와레 제사 레기 레게와세디 하고 와제 디 미게와스 하고 와제 디 제부 가르가르 레 미게와체 바르네 동아 용구요 바다 개와체 발레티네 디기 용구요 바디 보도 제 삼다도 제바체 하고 와제 되니 맞아 하고 제네 지게 미게웨 레디 파 미게웨 레디 사티 파가 돔 되니 게웨라 레 강도도 시오레 사시도 송어다.
Again, linking with the 12th verse, when we know that the presentation on karma is non-deceptive, in that from wholesome causes follow desired results, from unwholesome causes follow suffering results. When we're confident in this, we've reflected well on it, we will be conscientious. We will, with relative ease, take care of our mind, ensuring that at all times our mind is virtuous. And as soon as we notice our mind is lost in distraction, we'll pull it back to virtue. And in this way, we won't waste what remains of this opportunity, but we'll strive to accumulate virtue, knowing that even if we're not doing anything of any great magnitude, all these little causes we are creating, they count, they stack up and lead to desired results. So in this way, we'll be conscientious about our mind.
네네 자당 저기 제대 저기 레제 삼체 기위레세 개와다 미게 와서야 되다 저기 지가실에 저 류가 있으니 예주dim에 예주듬 지금에 선배 샬런 뇌베 저금 류유고는 뇌베 지가고 뇌베 저 이유고는 류가 있으면 샬런 뇌베 지금에 선배 섬로 고랑다 개화래 이 대부 디기야에바 다쳐 버려봐다 나디나시 당아 저기 현심제 탐지의 대화의 대나 선배 잠바고입니다. 심제들 동화다 자와 쇼선배 삼로 고미야. 근데 당아 저기 현심제 탐지 양이 류롱제 계속 탐지 현리야 직파 땅제 로고 지인 선배 삼로 두체상 개화를 와다. 니수의 대부 디기용에바 다져라. 제가 대부 디기용그리에서 개화세대 당 먼저 삼로 디수를 개화를 먼저 삼 디수 젠리아 잠제 삼다야 잠바 삼 고미야 젠리아 제외 삼지 고미야 안시에 심제 젠리아 펜바 지기 펜도 두긴 선배 삼로 다야 디셔상 개와 류가 이순유가 샬란녀베 지기 메세베 삼로지 세상 개와래 디수 여바나 만내가 저기 거소래 밤에비네라 요모께바다 젠리아 동아야에게 레가리라 지기 말해서 지산 되네자 디가 소고 말해 디바 마소 완자 디제부 동아용어가 되차가 말해서 그러
It's of great importance to understand clearly what is meant by virtue and non-virtue, what is meant by karma. So virtue and non-virtue is accumulated through physical behavior, through speech, and primarily through the mind, because the mind is what motivates the body and speech. So when one generates the attitude, I will not cause harm through my behavior, my physical behavior, speech, or even my way of thinking, that is a virtuous thought. That is the thought of ethical restraint, and it leads to virtuous karma, or it is itself virtuous karma. So when one is just thinking on one's own, I will no longer kill. I will not respond to harsh speech with further harsh speech, for example. Then that is a mind of patience that is being cultivated. That too is a virtuous thought. Where one is thinking, may all beings be freed of suffering, may they abide in happiness. These are virtuous thoughts. This is accumulating virtuous karma. That's love and compassion. When one generates a thought, may I help beings. When I see them suffering, may I help them. And where I lack the capacity, may I gain that capacity so that in the future I can help them. Here one is training in generosity. This is virtue. And from all these ways of thinking, one may act, and in this way, if one's acting physically or verbally, One is because the mind is virtuous, accumulating virtuous karma. So the virtuous karma comes from a virtuous way of thinking. And moreover, the mind of conscientiousness is a mind that ensures that we will stay within the bounds of what is ethical. We will restrain our mind within the bounds of what is ethical, not allow our mind to be unrestrained and come under the influence of the afflictions. So conscientiousness serves, when one is conscientious, one is taking care of one's mind and therefore physical behavior and speech, ensuring that we stay within the bounds of what's ethical, and that would include being generous, being loving, being compassionate, being patient, and so forth.
제사당아 저기 샘진지 변 부신지 추나라 사제 사되베네 만주기 추추된제 송괴체베나디 미지비지보고 소레바 교브로와다 진바디 그 만주기 콜리아 세링와 되게 안주 수고로와 제사디 아니 미지비 진바레스 제사다 더두 삼삼가서 제 삼노단에다 제바치고로와다 제사 샘진지마 부신지 추나라 수지양아서 소라 겹디 가르삼고레서 원닝제 샘베 삼링고로 콜레 잠제리고로 제사 잠바제 코디 콜레 디기 요나 삼바다 코닝제 샘베 삼데 소라 겹고로 제사 디가 소가서 가로스네 진비 냠내지고 미지비지 코소라 겹바제 진바지고래 제사 콜레 닝제 샘베 닝제리고래 콜레야 디기 요나 샘베 잠자제 잠바든 잠제 용고래 니 진비 제사 디네 집에 갑려야 나중에 또 삼다베네 진비 냠낸다 아니 지기 니제 냠내 잠제기 냠내데 용고로 받아.
As mentioned a few times, there are many differing ways that one can practice generosity. The most common, or the most commonly known, is that of material generosity. But there's also the generosity of giving Dharma and the generosity of giving fearlessness. So the giving of fearlessness, this refers to when a being is in tremendous fear because their life is in danger, where you, the practitioner of generosity, reaches out to help them, to save their life, to eradicate their fear that they are experiencing. In particular, it refers to the fear of losing life. So for ourselves, where we get such opportunities would be perhaps on a day like today, when walking outside and we notice in a puddle an insect desperately swimming, desperately trying to reach for what itself is a very distant shore to try and save itself. So what arises in the mind would be, almost certainly, would probably be first, compassion. Compassion is the wish for others to be freed of suffering. This clearly is a being that is suffering. And perhaps love also arises, which is the expression, may this being experience happiness. And then generosity is likely then to follow, the generosity of giving fearlessness, where one bends down and gently lifts the insect out of the puddle. And the insect happily runs off, not knowing quite what happened, but you have created virtue. The virtue probably first of compassion, the virtue second of love, the virtue third of generosity. So all of these would have been done together by a simple act of saving this insect's life. But because it's done with intention, these minds will have naturally arisen within you. And if you have been training in those minds, they will arise more readily and be much more powerful, and therefore that the virtue will be even stronger.
안디나시레 엔딩아주게 체사 삼담베네 당아주 밀리아 안지게 강아 망보테리게니 데직 사야도야다 멘 예네나세 강아테르 지사 당아주미 가시게 당라 된제 안지고들야 사야도에 로바체야다 엔 멘주게 토네 로바체 직두체어데 당 혼주게 디 제겐 로바체겐 삼노 코론주가 할수는 편이 미디게레 냠타 Ganga Tigus Biget, that Ganga Dele Towers and Bigeta Console Ningsi Gigoro Jam Consulatiki Mindo, Chisan Consulatiki Kusibe, and the Jigme and Jamze Ligore, and Digalia, and Susuki Mengi Tone Chimbetayada, the Nekalaru, Chicheada, Dulotea Dicidu, Jimbe Yamasa, then the Niji, Jedu Kapla Jimbe Yamenda. Passiolia Zewatang and Jambinium Chasanium to yon together, Chagdo, and Lucy the Shimju Shevena.
A further illustration would be when one observes or sees human suffering, and we may encounter this directly, but otherwise indirectly, and we may then want to help, either directly if we can, or indirectly by charities, where we see, for example, people suffering from food insecurity, perhaps famine, struggling to sustain their life or their loved ones, let alone their own life, or others not being able to afford medical treatment. Medical treatment is accessible, but they are too impoverished to be able to afford it. Observing that, naturally compassion will arise, wanting them to be freed of such suffering. And love will arise, wanting them to abide in happiness. And then generosity may well arise, and the wish to give financially, or if one is directly meeting these people, to give them direct aid. And then one may, from having such a wish, this mind of generosity, may act under its influence and give money or give food or give medicine. So in this way, especially if one's training one's mind, these thoughts will arise more spontaneously and be of greater strength, leading to even more merit being accumulated.
Dine zadang jugi churum soina gewa pa me ba ji sa tu go le ben lunga yusme shan la nebe jigi me sembe samlo ta da shan lia jambe semna zewe samba samda ba na da digi thone nga ju nebe jigi me sembe samda ya du ane shan lia gang shu shu yu shu su go ba ji zada jugi na yarum ji yang se sung go le ge di ne nga zo zemlin na la ka le mang bu ji gang a yong ya mang bu ji Manzu Mizu Shaganga Res, Benanganzuki, Chiki, Makshu Jadika, the Nika Ganga Magitone Ganga, Tigor Miso, Shiada, Chiki, Chipenjo Ganga Jaya, Sola Ganga Jaya, Sayaduna Ganga Jaya, Chazan Magitone Diadi, Majagi, the Misu Yures, Madokor, Jui Trujina Jiki Margare Mares, Misu Yures, Dinashi, Zuki Lumbalia, Chik Korulia, but Chik Tergala, so what the shoe, Chik, so right, Duara, the Nick Moshu, Jedu Koyul, never chair, the Chasans music gores. Chizan Diso Caresene, the Niki, Unity, music or some Mogi, Tony Dango, Maracaras, and some Jamze or Dango, Marachere, Jamze Dango, Surumsungo, Maresta. Chizadi, Shen, Zewe, Summer, Shen, Dunga, the Mo, the Yiku, Shen, Dunga, Tahuts, and Jamze, some Yobaina, and Denigi Maja Tranjada directed search Shan never get to go Mares. Chesa Shan never chigi mess and Surum Jusona, Digi Shan never get Jawa Digi, Bejet Naja Shan Kanga Chigi Marwas. Chesa Deni and some Denigi Kanga Rigdi, and the Misu Gores, Chesa the Misu Kanga Patumeba Mongores. Chesa Misu Kanga di, and the Migi Shan Jamzeda, Jamzeocom, Jamze, some Yam Tabena. Music Ganga the Scatures. Jezadang Zemle Shiku by now, and the Miriam Ya Jamzen Yamnaja, the Kitchen said, getting that Jam Jeda, go Labshel Mason Jam Jigga, Zebetin and so ordergy, and the Zemlia, Jamzen Yamna the Jam who do the Jamze Bear who do said that take George the Sungore.
In His Holiness's talks, he regularly refers to how outer peace comes about through cultivating inner peace. And this is because so much of this suffering in the world comes both directly or indirectly from human activity. What's most obvious, the most obvious illustration is that of warfare. Warfare comes about due to intentional action by human beings. So too, though, does the destruction of our natural environment, both on land, in the air, in the sea. This comes about due to human intentional activity. And such activity comes about by people whose ethics, whose love, whose compassion is lacking. If one has a strong ethical outlook, it would not be possible to engage in warfare. It would not be possible to engage in environmental destruction. Similarly, with love and compassion. If one has a loving, compassionate heart, one cannot engage in the destruction of the environment or human beings. So therefore, His Holiness encourages us by transforming our own mind, cultivating inner peace, we have an impact on the world around us. We do have an impact in this way, in that when we are more ethical, when we are more loving and compassionate, we ourselves are more peaceful, and thereby all those directly around us, we will not be bringing harm into their lives. We will not add to their burden of suffering. And by not harming those around us, we are adding to the peace in the world. And by not adding to their suffering, making their lives a bit easier, they are less likely to harm others, and so forth. So in this way, even us very ordinary people without great power and influence in this world, we can have a positive impact, and we can have a positive impact directly on the lives of others.
잠재를 때는 초고거를 semje dunro 신나랑 아주 미나다 자산 잠재를 때는 초고거를 상아주 미로 삼다면은 보고 중중 기여야 되는 아미 잠경을 전에 아주야 최세 상로지기 지교래서 제사 아미 잠경 맞아외나 기드는 아미 잠경 맞아외나 아주 초투야요 말해서 제사다 야 충준의 야 철차에 대한 밤이 잠경을 때네 한 잠지기 돈에 아주 상로지고 그래서 다시 아주기다 살롱 제세제 아주기 지게 첨보처 소수기에다 제투에게 내가 제투에 차베는 마음을 신기 미션다기 마음을 잠재 고르해서 제사도 수직이 소설이야 잠재 매바죠 수지다 저와 미수다 저와 매바죠 소수지부되에 처하고래 처투 말해 네투 말해서 제사 니네 인상 마음을야 미션기 마음을 잠재 고르해서 제사 디 인자다 미지기지리야 잠재시야데 배계치 모래 제사다 아주 잠재를 되는 초고 그래서 제사 잠재기 파가 같이 숙체다 이 지교에는 아주 미사지기면에 베트는 미야가 한차상 한 기와 안에 지게 소소게 삼례네 소소 지게 시디체와 안에 시한리에 판도 체와 주투야 지금 거래서 제사다 잠재 매바죠 공로 초보당 그디나지 공로 초보당 요라 시디게 집에는 현래 체와 집에는 지수와 나래 강아 튀기래 아니 소수기 미사지 나래네 강아 튀기래 다 소수 직구되면은 기우야 말았어 그래서 콘라 나래 직직직이면 나래 제와 지금 콘라데 디디 나래 다가면 나야 지금 선배 되네 콘라치 되신 소수 직구되나 기우는 거 말해 안 소수 미사지 좀 되면은 랑마기 맞아 샹달에 강아 튀기래 지수나 되면은 랑마기 맞아 샹달에 강아 튀기래 제사 되네 인사 잠재딩 아주 계치 모시고 제사 잠재까지 매바지 잠재기 독초 콩로다 뇨라 사와되게 미디가와 있는 소수이나 마기와 미션달이야 강아지 차고래 소수게 잠재 냠내전 잠재까지 숨 소설이야 시안이야 잠재게 삼로가지 숙체에나 소수이나 기부 아니 소수게 샹달이네 안지게 강한 마테바 디기 주투야 준 거래 제사다 잠재 냠내세데 빼 마세 계치 모시고 세다 여름 저기 디나 망제 슈 송비 갑리야 다 잠재 냠내데 고고도 세데 두시는 제 소로 쏘는 거래 쏜 거래
These minds of love and compassion, love which is wanting all beings to abide in happiness, and compassion, wanting them all to be freed of suffering, these are of paramount importance. So either as having been a child yourself or as a parent, we know the great importance of love and compassion when raising children. Children, especially when they are young, both in the womb and when are infants, are entirely dependent on the care from their parents. And at that particular young and tender age, love and compassion is indispensable for the child's survival. But as the child grows too, for them to be not just be happy, but to turn out well, they depend on love and care from their parents. So this we can recognize quite easily. And if we, to the extent we recognize this, we should then ask ourselves the question, but should there be any boundary applied to when love and compassion is applied? When our child or that child gets a bit older, perhaps is now working, should they are they no longer now worthy of love and compassion? Of course not, they're your child. And moreover, is there any boundary we should place between others who are not one's children and consider them not necessarily worthy of being treated with genuine love and compassion from our side? And when we think about this and use our reasoning, we cannot come up with any reasons why not to hold others with love and compassion, why not to have a tender attitude towards others. Because we can find no reason to point to any being, no matter who they are, and say, you are not worthy of being held with love. You are not worthy of being freed from suffering. All beings are worthy. All beings are worthy of being held tenderly and lovingly. This we should think about and take as a motivation to ensure that the way we think and act towards others is dominated by love and compassion. In the same meditation, we look at the opposite way of acting. When our mind is angry, how do we feel? If we are alone at home, our day is destroyed. We are in pain. And if there are others in our home, quite likely their day is about to be destroyed by our anger. And if we then go out into society, to our place of work or into shops or driving in our car, we will destroy the happiness of others too. Anger only harms. So by seeing the faults of anger, seeing the benefits of love and compassion, becomes very clear which is the better person, which is the happier person to be. And taking that as motivation, we train our mind in love and compassion. And the more habituated we are to minds of love and compassion, our habituation to anger will weaken. And we'll find love and compassion dominating our mind. It will arise with greater ease, and it will abide and dominate us evermore. And the way we interact with others will change. With this love and compassion, initially we'll need to contrive it, generate it intentionally. But later, through continued training, our sincerity will be apparent, and we will hold all with love and care. When His Holiness teaches, He encourages us in this more than anything to develop a loving heart, to develop a compassionate heart.
디링이 조된 대샤스나 되고도 대자다 디나시리 아주 냠내 제데 디쇼 슈바나시다 아주게 대티에 상보 데니기 고합 약고 여베 텔야 제름치게다 냠내 약고 지고레 디마제바나 나 펌보리 소바나시다 아주게 냠내 제디 디시 카산타 디링 슈바나시 아주 링아스 녀제데 메츠름소야 안젠리아 디기주나 선비에 삼로데콤 디네시엔레 동아 자와쇼 세베 삼로콤 Shenlia, me pembach tugi, Shen you don't say that dig you to me pember tugi, some big samata, then Dondalang some jatam san yoko on top of show, some big dosing some dieting on to get a yamlen did some luciani on the diet. The Zada Susuki, Dinetana, that Susuluma, the chicken, King and the cherry couple ya, and chicken, Shenlia never cheer, go up, Cornline, go over, and Shenlia, and chick me, never chick me, some diet, that's all. The next was you know, Jack. And this,
in brief, is what Lama Tsongkhapa is asking us all to do. To recognize what our actual potential is and to strive to fulfill it. That whatever it is that turns out to remain of this life, to use it well. And to use it well means to transform our mind, to develop the strong determination so it becomes our very nature that I will not harm others. No matter how they treat me, no matter what situation I come across, I will hold all others as dear. No no matter what people say to me, no matter what they're doing around me or doing to others, I will hold them dear. And the way I interact with them will be with wisdom, with intelligence, with care and kindness. This is how I can be. This is the person I can be. So Lama Tsongkhapa is asking us now to fulfill our potential and become the very best that we can be. So with this rain, who knows, maybe there'll be some mosquitoes outside. And they may well then see your exposed flesh and see a delicious meal. An unethical person will immediately just kill it without any thought. An ethical person will recognize that this insect is from its side doing you no harm. So you use your intelligence, you know it's doing you no harm. And you can gently brush it away, just create a bit of a breeze so that it flies away, it misses your arm. In this way, you do no harm, you protect yourself, but you do no harm. Okay, thank you. Then we'll finish there for this morning. Thank you all.